everybody. Welcome in. We have been going through a series of conversations and different topics, and really it almost seems like different entries as we have dived headfirst into 1 Peter. And so this week we find ourselves, I seem to have taken a pause on chapter 3 and really wanted to go a little bit deeper because there was like 3 different subjects. And so this week we'll hit on the remainder of chapter 3, and then we're actually going to go into chapter 4. And there may be 2 more weeks where we dive into 1 Peter, or there might be 1 more week. But my goal is to keep these messages at a bare minimum, just the essentials, as quick as possible, not to quickly just go over the scriptures, but mainly because I feel as though, and maybe you can relate, this digital behind the camera talking to you on the other side, wherever you're at, though it is incredibly, we're grateful for it, sometimes it's like we just need to get the main thing. So let's jump in and get the main thing. So chapter 3, 1 Peter, and I'm going to read verse 13, go a couple verses, and then we're going to stop. It says this: "Who is going to harm you if you're eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you are blessed. Do not fear their threats. Do not be frightened, but in your hearts revere Christ as Lord." And here it is: "Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have." Always be prepared, in season and out of season. What is it about the life that you're living that would provoke someone, a friend, a coworker, a neighbor, a family member, to say, like, why do you have hope? Hey, there's something different about you, and I haven't seemed to be able to grasp it. You know, for some reason, you're just incredibly positive. For some reason, when we have conversation, there's so much love behind every breath that you speak. There's so much sincerity in who you are as a person. And really, the reality is, if people aren't asking us, if people aren't asking you, like, why are you different? Then maybe we should refocus and relook at the way that we're living our lives. Because really, the truth of the matter is, it's almost as if everything has been flipped upside down in regards to morality, in regards to ethics, in regards to morals. And so Peter goes a little bit deeper in that, but let's continue reading. He says, "But do not do this with gentleness and respect." Notice, very specifically, Peter says, if someone's going to ask you why you have this hope, when you respond, it should always be with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience, so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. For it is better, if it is God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil. So I want to pause there, and I want to fast forward to chapter 4, because there's a parallel that I want to point out. And so in chapter 3, Peter is telling us, when someone asks us the way that we're living, there's something about hope that you resemble, that you relinquish, that you give to others. And in our conversation, in the way that you live, I'm blown away. What is this hope? What is it about you? In chapter 4, he goes on and he says, as a result of the suffering and as the result of your attitude, as a result as we experience in our earthly body suffering and persecution, as a result of those things, they do not live the rest of their earthly lives for evil human desires, meaning these are believers, but rather for the will of God. And here it is, verse 3. "For you have spent enough time in the past doing what pagans chose to do." Again, pagans is just another word for people that are completely and utterly anti-God, anti-living the things of righteousness. And what you're doing is you're living in debauchery, you're living in lust, in drunkenness, in orgies, carousing in detestable idolatry. They are surprised. Notice the word that Peter chooses to use. He says they're surprised that you do not join them in their reckless, wild living. And they, the world, they, pagans, they heap abuse on you but they will have to give an account to him who is ready to judge the living and the dead. For this reason, the gospel was preached even to those who are now dead, so that they might be judged according to the standards, human standards in regard to the body, but live according to God in regard to the spirit. So here's the two main points that I wanted to share with you in our conversation of ground zero, of going back to the basics, of the specifics of ethics and morality, of the way that we should live our lives, the way that we should conduct ourselves as people of faith, the markers of God, as Peter would point out in verse 8. And as he expresses the markers of God, when you live like-minded, when you live sympathetic, when you love one another, when you're compassionate, when you're humble, when you don't repay evil with evil, but instead you repay evil with blessing and with love, what happens is people begin to look at you differently. Point one, perspective one, entry thought one. When they look at you differently, they say, man, when we're at work and everything just seems to drop on you and you get bad news, why is it that you always have a positive, optimistic perspective? Why is it that in the midst of an incredible global pandemic and unrest and chaos, you seem to have peace? Peter says, one, those questions should be asked to us. And two, when you respond, if you really are sympathetic, if you really are compassionate, if you really love one another, if you really are humble, you should respond in such a way that it always responds in sincerity, and it always responds in grace, and it always responds in love. And the reason why I think this is very interesting is because the problem is, if someone were to ask us, if someone were to ask you right now or tomorrow on Monday, and they say, hey, why are you so filled with peace? Like, why aren't you frustrated and bothered by everything going on? Or why is it that when this unrest is going on, you seem to have rest in your soul? And a lot of times what we can do, if we have a posture of pride, and if we have a posture of religion, and if we make it seem like we're so much better than everyone else, then what is already inside of your soul will always come out. And when it's a conversation of spirituality, when it's a conversation of faith, when it's a conversation about God, if we are religious, we will respond in a religious manner. Meaning, well, the reason why is because I live a Christian life and I just am good and I know it all. And well, the reason why is because, I don't live like you. I don't go out and do X, Y, and Z. I don't go out and drink. I don't go out and party. I don't talk to like my coworkers the way that you talk to. I just was raised in the church. Or, whatever the cliche response of someone that is religious, what happens is it's not sincere and it's not loving and it is malicious and it has no sense of respect or gentleness. And so all of your living in regards to the hope that is in you will not be a witness to your brothers or to your sisters, to your mom or to your dad, to your coworkers, to your spouse, to your children. And here is the dilemma. I truly believe, if I'm going to be honest, because at Coin we really do believe, and we've said this, we say we're for the one. We're for the one, meaning we're actually for the one that would come to us and say, what is it? What is this hope? And I believe that there is an art to speaking to that one. I believe that there is an art in regards to how we respond. And Peter gives us some key ingredients into how we are to respond to such questions, to how we're to respond to why do you believe with what you believe. We are to understand how to respond. And really, the prescription or the prerequisite is sincerity and respect. I think if we respect people and we're sincere with people, we will always, and we're empathetic and we're compassionate, we will always respond with love and with grace. And that really is the conversation of Jesus, especially most definitely when it is to those that do not have hope. And we are reminding them of the hope of God that they may not have, but they see it in us and through us. And then my second perspective or point is, as Peter says in chapter 4, starting at verse 3, again, he says, "For you've spent enough time in the past." So we're talking about the past now. We're talking about your previous lifestyle. And he says, well, how you lived was just like the pagans did. It was in debauchery, it was lust, it was drunkenness, it was orgy, it was carousing, it was detestable idolatry, it was worshiping other things or other objects more than you would worship God. But in this case, they didn't even worship God, they just worshiped other things. He says, so what happens is they are surprised that you don't join them in doing such things. So my second perspective on this, on giving an account of the hope that is in you is, are people even recognizing that you're different? That you live a different way? That you conduct yourself in a different manner? That the lifestyle at nighttime is different than the lifestyle of, let's just say, quote unquote, the pagans or people that do not believe in God or pursue or desire God? Are your characteristics of lifestyle different, or are they the same? You know, I think about if we were to just go, let's just go back 100 years. Let's go back 50 years. A lot of what we're seeing today is so anti-God, right? We can all agree with that. We can all agree that it's anti-peace, it's anti-love, it's anti-grace. I mean, all you have to do is turn on the news, and regardless if the side is right or wrong, we forget that there's grace in every person. We forget that we should be compassionate. We forget that God, no matter the creed or the action, will always reconcile himself to that person if they choose to ask God to change them from the inside out. We really, if we believe that God can change our past and create a better future, then our outlook on the way we conduct ourselves in other people, to other people, should be always with grace and always with love. But the problem is, sometimes we get that really gray. We get that really mixed up. So again, perspective 2, how are you conducting your life? And the way that you're conducting your life, is it causing your friends to say, whoa, you don't live like us, yet I respect you because of your love and your sincerity and your gentleness towards me. You don't live the same way that I live, and you have this hope. What is this hope? And I believe that in order for anyone to even ask us what this hope is, we should be a type of person that someone would feel comfortable to ask us that. Meaning, if they're living this way and we're living a different way, can we still be their friend? Can we still have conversations with them without putting them down or without neglecting them as a human being? Or are we so calloused in our thinking that we are just religious with every person that is not a brother or a sister? You see, this is the dilemma of Christianity. This is the dilemma of every generation. This was the dilemma with the Pharisees, and at times this is even a dilemma with me. I can get so comfortable with my bubble of friends that know God, that when I am around someone that doesn't know God, I automatically judge them internally. And Peter would say that's not the marker of God. And so I always have to work incredibly diligently hard to push back a judgmental and prideful perspective of Sammy, because I consider myself a follower of God. When there are people in my life every single day that should be asking me, what's this hope that you have? Why do you have peace in the midst of chaos? And we should always be ready to give a response. But before you give a response, whatever your response is, let it be in love and in grace and in gentleness and respect towards your other friend, because they're an actual human being. So, as we conclude, perspective one, hopefully people are asking you because you have this hope. And when they ask you, respond with sincerity like Christ. And perspective two is, are you even living a different lifestyle that people would even ask? Or are you just living the same lifestyles they are and considering yourself a follower of Jesus? Now, mind you, there is always grace in the mistakes and the mess, right? Always. God will always forgive you. He will always take care of you. He will always give you a better future than your past. The problem there is, if we claim to be a follower of Jesus, if we claim to have the hope of humanity, yet we're looking just like everyone else that doesn't believe in God, my encouragement to you is to look at your lifestyle and ask God, what are the things that I must change, that I must recalibrate, that I must shift in my soul? For some, there are big changes, right? Like, they're an incredible ideology shift to where you have gotten so accustomed and you are in such a habit of doing that it would seem impossible to stop. And my encouragement would be to stop, because our lives are a direct reflection of what is inside of us. Externally is always what comes out, but it first starts internally. So I would encourage you on that if there are big habits. And then the second are smaller habits. Maybe for someone that has been following Jesus and you have grown from those big changes. What happens is they're really big at first, big shifts. Maybe saying, hey, I can't live together with you anymore. I can't be dating you anymore because we're two different people and we just don't think the same way. I'm talking about dating people, not married people. You're stuck if you're married, unless there's abuse or unless someone passes away. But that's a whole other conversation. But you see, at first they're big, big decisions. Meaning I can't go out in the nightlife and do those things anymore. Big decisions such as I can't continue these habits, these sinful habits. I have to switch it and shift it. I have to change the way that I talk, because the way that I talk is always degrading to other people. Big changes. And I think that the bigger the changes are, man, God's moving in my life. Man, God's doing something in my life. And then they get smaller and smaller and smaller and more specific and more honed in details of our soul. And if you're in a room and everyone knows you and you're not living and you've changed the big things, my question to you is, what are the small details that God is asking you to shift? Like, how do you think about other people? Like, what are the thoughts that you have towards people that don't think the same way that you think? What is it that you're allowing your mind to control in regards to certain decisions you make? Smaller, more specific decisions. Do you allow fear to rule your life? Or do you allow the hope of God to change your life? Like, small, specific, detailed. Are you gossiping? Are you talking harsh about one another to your spouse or to your friends? Do you feel like you have pride internally? It might not be external. It might be a false humility. Specific things. Big, transformative habits will eventually, as you find yourself on this journey with Christ, into specifics. And regardless of the big or the small, the macro or the micro, are people looking at you and saying, there's something different about you? You see, my hope is that this would be the case for our community. If you consider yourself in our community if you actually live in this city or the surrounding cities, or if you're somewhere else where, let the kingdom of God rule in your life everywhere you go. I love you. I'm so grateful for you. I pray you're doing well. I'm really excited for the future of Coin and what we're doing in this season. Stay tuned on our social media. Check in with us. If you're local, if you're not too far, we're starting to gather once a month. We're starting to create house churches. We're meeting face to face. Ask us, and we should have a good response of the hope in Christ that we have. I love you. I'm grateful for you. Thank you for everything that you've done for our community. Thank you for giving if you've given. And I hope to see you next time. Share this. Let's get the word out. Remind people that there is this hope inside of you, and we must allow everyone around us to know this hope. And the hope certainly is Jesus. Take care, and I'll see you next time.